Welcome to Redacted Tonight. Let's do this, shall we? This is the comedy show where Americans in America covering American news are called foreign agents. Over the past couple of years, our government, led by Donald Trump, has destroyed normal relations with China. Most of you know that. They've taken one step after another to ensure the two nuclear powers have a relationship about as stable as O.J. Simpson had with his ex-wife. And of course, the Democrats seem to totally be fine with this war hawkery. The Trump administration has been going after China in a bunch of different ways. They imposed harsh sanctions on Chinese officials, supposedly for cracking down on protesters. Didn't Trump use chemical warfare on the White House lawn to take on his own citizens so he could walk over to a church and hold up a book he clearly had never read? But yeah, we're upset with the way China treats protesters. The U.S. has also banned tech companies like TikTok and Huawei, and they've treated Chinese students and scientists like garbage, acting like they're all supervillains. And they shuttered the Chinese consulate in Houston by pretending it was a hotbed of economic espionage. Right. Have you been to Houston? Unless the Chinese stole their barbecue sauce recipes and truck nuts, I don't think China really needed economic espionage. So all of this, along with our media, has turned China back into the evil red menace. Suddenly, most Americans think every one of the 1.4 billion Chinese citizens is odd job. I think he was Japanese, but part of holding racist stereotypes is not caring if you get them right. So yes, our anti-China racist propaganda is working. As was covered at Popular Resistance, Pew Research reported that unfavorable views of China have reached new highs in the U.S., more than doubling from 35% to 73% between 2005 and 2020. The fact that Western public opinion on China is marching in lockstep with the State Department's call for Cold War aggression reflects the convergence of state, military, and corporate media interests which monopolize our media ecosystem. Our corporate media often pretends like they're resisting Trump, but then they do his bidding by taking vibrant, diverse cultures and peoples and distilling them all down to China evil, or Iran evil, or Russia evil. And this serves to manufacture consent for Cold War with these countries. So is all this anti-China reporting true? Is it false? Are they not trying to kill Americans every night while we sleep soundly in our beds with our footy pajamas on? Because CNN told me they were. The great majority of this anti-China fake news originates from just a few think tanks and quote-unquote experts. For example, in 2018, CNN reported a growing number of Chinese military scientists are using their research collaborations with Western universities to take their host country's expertise back home to improve China's own technology, a new Australian report claimed Tuesday. The report is by the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, ASPI. My God! China's stealing our technology! It has to be true because it was reported by the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. And that sounds super legit. It has all the official words: strategic, and policy, and institute, and Australian. Well, maybe not that last one. Here's another large expose by the New York Times. The police in China are collecting blood samples from men and boys from across the country to build a genetic map of its roughly 700 million males, giving the authorities a powerful new tool for their emerging high-tech surveillance state. They have swept across the country since late 2017 to collect enough samples to build a vast DNA database. Holy Jeebus! The evil Chinese are doing what we've been doing voluntarily with Ancestry.com. But theirs sounds so much worse. So who revealed this awful DNA surveillance? New York Times says it's according to a new study published on Wednesday by the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. What? So who the fuck are these Australia policy strategery institutions? Well, it's a think tank out of Australia. You might have guessed that much. In the last fiscal year, ASPI received 69% of its funding, over 7 million Australian dollars, from the Australian Department of Defence and federal government. Another $1.89 million came from overseas government agencies, including the embassies of Israel and Japan, the U.S. Department of Defense and State Department, and the NATO Strategic Comms Center. Another $1.1 million came from defense industries and the private sector, including Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman. So a think tank funded by the Australian military, Israel, Lockheed Martin, and Northrop Grumman is pumping out reports that say China sucks. Does that shock anyone? Would you perhaps read that New York Times article slightly differently if it said, China is collecting everyone's DNA, says report by pro-U.S. militaries and weapons of war contractors who only get paid if they sell weapons of war to kill lots of people? I mean, I think New York Times should update their style guide to include that info. Setting the groundwork for a new Cold War with China will ultimately make billions of dollars for these weapons contractors. Think about that return on investment. It's incredible. They spend a few measly $1 million to fund a think tank in Australia. It pumps out propaganda garbage. CNN and the New York Times breathlessly tell their childlike readers about what the super official report said. The U.S. government successfully manufactures consent for Cold War with a nuclear power. And then not only does the U.S. military turn to Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman for all the weapons that they need to be ready to fight China, but so do Australia and Japan and Israel and European allies, et cetera, et cetera. The weapons contractors are suddenly more popular than the only girl at the 8th grade dance showing off her cleavage. Sorry, that was not appropriate. They're more popular than the only boy at the 8th grade dance showing off cleavage. Wait. More popular than the gender-neutral child showing off whatever bits he or she or they would like to show off. I'm not bothered by their bits, whichever bits are showing. Whatever they choose. Gender is a construct! So let's review the steps, sorry, it's got to me. The steps used for successful anti-China, xenophobia, propaganda, detailed in Popular Resistance. Step 1, so-called independent security analysts and think tankers that look just like this come out with very official report saying China did something awful, like poop in everybody's salads before shipping them overseas to be placed in your McDonald's Happy Meal, and you would not know the difference. These experts don't make a big deal about the fact that they are funded almost completely by a combination of weapons contractors, Western militaries, and other anti-China countries like Israel. I mean, they don't even look evil. Look at them. They seem lovely. They might even live in your neighborhood. Step 2, the reports just happen to be picked up by CNN and the New York Times and NPR and Fox News and the Country Music Channel. And I'm sure those networks don't have any bias that makes them lean towards choosing reports by weapons contractors and U.S.-backed militaries. It's just a coincidence that they all do it. Come on, it's just a coincidence that we basically never see any of these corporate media channels pick up a story like, Chinese people are friendly, or Chinese baby has cute little chubby face. I mean, look at that shit! That should lead every broadcast, every news broadcast. Be a better world. But no, those stories slip through the cracks. Oh, and by the way, the corporate media will cover the reports from places like the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, while not mentioning they're funded by weapons contractors and militaries. That's our little secret. Step 3. Western nations will then point to the reports by the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, etc., to make the point that China is super duper scary. And we have to be ready to kill all the Chinese people because they're up to something. Even the chubby-cheeked babies. In fact, especially the chubby-cheeked babies. Of course, those were already the geopolitical goals of these Western nations, and it just so happened these reports helped them make the case. What luck! Thank goodness, finally, something is going America's way. Step 4. The Western nations give billion-dollar contracts to weapon contractors like Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman to prepare for the ever-growing China threat. The weapons contractors then take a teeny tiny portion of that money and use it to fund the think tank that wrote the report in the first place. Do you see how it works? They fund the fucking reports that justify the wars that get them the money. And there's one little thing I forgot to mention also earlier. Can you guess who are some of the biggest funders of CNN, NPR, New York Times, Fox News, et cetera, et cetera? The goddamn holy hell, mucus-sucking, dog-farting, morally bankrupt, shit-fist farming weapons contractors. Here's a better diagram of how this whole thing works. I hope that clears it up. Way up. Look, this is not to say there aren't any flaws with Chinese society or government, just like there's a shitload of problems with U.S. society and government. But when you see anti-China propaganda, and you wonder why we've been told to hate them over the past 10 years, when we used to be told that they were fine, they were nice people, keep in mind, you are being manipulated, okay? That's what you need to know. You are being lied to in order to create war and economic destruction. We are not our nations. We are not the sociopaths who rule our nations. We are not the psychopath billionaires who own our nations. The vast majority of us are regular humans who are kept in line with propaganda and fear tactics. And we should be working together rather than trying to destroy each other. And saying such a thing makes me a radical. Coming to you from Washington, D.C., the belly of the beast, this is Redacted Tonight.